The morning of graduation, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing the speech I wasn't supposed to give. My hands trembled as I straightened my cap for the 100th time. 4 years of being told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, dedicated enough, and here I was about to flip the script on everyone who doubted me. It started freshman year when Mrs. Henderson handed back my first English essay with a C- and a note that said, "Lacks original thought." I remember sitting in that cold classroom, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. She looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Some students are meant for college, Marcus. Others, well, there are plenty of good trade schools." The way she said my name, like it left a bad taste in her mouth, still echoes in my mind. By sophomore year, I'd been labeled. Mr. Rodriguez, my math teacher, would skip over me when I raised my hand. "Let's hear from someone who did the homework," he'd say, even though my paper was right there on my desk, completed. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Park, suggested I lower my expectations when I mentioned wanting to apply to state universities. "Be realistic, Marcus. Your grades are average at best, and you don't have the extracurriculars colleges look for." She slid a pamphlet for community college across her desk, tapping it twice with her manicured nail. But they didn't see me in the public library until closing time, teaching myself calculus from YouTube videos because Mr. Rodriguez's explanations went too fast. They didn't see me rewriting essays until my fingers cramped, determined to find that original thought Mrs. Henderson claimed I lacked. They didn't know about the part-time job at the grocery store, bagging groceries until midnight to help Mom pay rent, or about taking care of my little sister Emma when Mom worked double shifts at the hospital. Junior year brought Principal Davies into my story. I'd started a blog about educational inequality, writing under a pseudonym about how the system fails students who don't fit the mold. When someone traced it back to me, I was called into his office. The walls were covered with photos of successful alumni, doctors, lawyers, athletes, none of whom looked like me. "This kind of rabble-rousing isn't what we expect from our students," he said, his voice measured and cold. "You're painting our school in a negative light. I strongly suggest you take it down, or we'll have to consider disciplinary action." I didn't take it down. Instead, I made it private and kept writing. My followers grew from dozens to hundreds to thousands. Students from other schools started sharing their stories. Teachers from different states reached out, saying they were trying to be better because of what I'd written. But at Jefferson High, I was still just Marcus Thompson, the kid who wasn't enough. The turning point came senior year, 3 months before graduation. We had to submit applications for valedictorian and salutatorian speakers, even though everyone knew Sarah Chen would be valedictorian with her perfect GPA, and Trevor Mills would be salutatorian. But there was a third spot, the student voice speaker, chosen by student vote. Usually it went to whoever was most popular, but this year something different happened. I submitted my application with an essay about resilience, about how every no had become fuel for my fire. I wrote about the janitor, Mr. Pete, who'd sneak me into the computer lab after hours so I could work on my blog when our home internet got cut off. About Ms. Martinez, the young biology teacher who was the only one who ever said, "I believe in you, Marcus," showed them they're wrong. About my mother, who'd fallen asleep at my graduation announcement, still wearing her scrubs, tears streaming down her face because her boy had made it. The essay got leaked. Someone, I never found out who, posted it on the school's unofficial Instagram page. Within hours, it had hundreds of shares. Students I'd never talked to stopped me in the hallway. "That's exactly how Mr. Rodriguez makes me feel," said Anthony, a quiet kid from my calculus class. "Mrs. Henderson told me the same thing freshman year," whispered Jessica, who I'd seen crying in the bathroom more than once. "When the votes came in, I'd won by a landslide." Principal Davies's face turned the color of old paper when he announced it at assembly. Mrs. Henderson's jaw clenched so tight I thought she might crack a tooth. But they couldn't take it back. The rules were the rules, and the students had spoken. The weeks leading up to graduation were tense. I was called into meeting after meeting. "Your speech needs to be approved," Principal Davies said, sliding a paper across his desk. "Nothing controversial, nothing that reflects poorly on the school. This is a celebration, not a protest." Mrs. Henderson was appointed as my speech advisor, which meant she red-penned every word I wrote. "Too aggressive," she'd say, "too accusatory, too personal." By the fifth draft, my speech was a hollow shell of thank yous and empty platitudes. "This is perfect," Mrs. Henderson said, finally satisfied. "Stick to this script, and everything will go smoothly." I took the approved speech, folded it neatly, and put it in my pocket. But I had another speech, the real one, hidden in my other pocket. The one I'd been writing since freshman year, adding to it every time someone told me I wasn't enough. The night before graduation, I couldn't sleep. I sat on our fire escape, looking out at the city lights, wondering if I had the courage to do what I was planning. Mom found me there at 3 a.m. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me, her arm around my shoulders. "You know, baby," she finally said, "I've watched you swallow your words for 4 years. Maybe it's time to speak them." Graduation day was unseasonably hot for May. The football field was packed with families, the bleachers creaking under the weight of expectations and dreams. I sat with my class, my leg bouncing nervously, the 2 speeches burning holes in my pockets. Sarah Chen gave her valedictorian speech, perfect, polished, forgettable. Trevor Mills followed with statistics and quotes from dead presidents. Then it was my turn. Principal Davies introduced me with the minimum required enthusiasm. "And now Marcus Thompson will share a few words as our student voice speaker." The way he said "few words" was a warning. Mrs. Henderson sat in the front row with the other teachers, the approved speech in her hand, ready to follow along. I walked to the podium, my heart hammering so hard I was sure the microphone would pick it up. I pulled out the approved speech, smoothed it on the podium, looked at it for a long moment. Then I folded it back up, put it in my pocket, and pulled out the real speech. I heard Mrs. Henderson's sharp intake of breath. Principal Davies half rose from his chair. "4 years ago," I began, my voice steady despite my shaking hands, "I walked into Jefferson High full of dreams. I was told pretty quickly that I should dream smaller." I looked directly at Mrs. Henderson. "I was told I lacked original thought, that I should consider trade school, that I should be realistic about my limitations." The crowd had gone silent. Parents leaned forward, students straightened in their seats. "But here's what they didn't know," I continued, finding my rhythm. Every dismissal became determination. Every "you can't" became "watch me." When Mr. Rodriguez wouldn't call on me in class, I taught myself calculus at night. When Mrs. Park said I wasn't college material, I applied to 12 universities. When Principal Davies tried to silence my voice, I found other ways to speak. Principal Davies was standing now, moving toward the podium. But something extraordinary happened. Ms. Martinez stood up in the teachers' section. Then Mr. Pete, the janitor, stepped out from where he'd been standing by the maintenance shed. One by one, students started standing, not clapping, just standing, bearing witness. "I'm not here to bash my teachers," I said, speaking faster now, seeing Principal Davies getting closer. "I'm here to tell every student who's been labeled not enough that you are more than enough. You are extraordinary. Your struggles don't diminish you. They refine you. Your failures aren't endpoints. They're plot twists in your success story." Principal Davies had reached the side of the stage, but the crowd of standing students and parents had created a wall of support. Someone's mum shouted, "Let him speak." Others joined in. Davies stopped, his face red with fury and embarrassment. "To Mrs. Henderson," I said, looking directly at her, "thank you. Your doubt taught me to trust my own voice. To Mr. Rodriguez, your dismissal taught me to be my own teacher. To Mrs. Park, your low expectations taught me to set my own bar. And to Principal Davies, your attempts to silence me taught me that some voices are too important to quiet." The approved speech had been 3 minutes of nothing. This speech was stretching to 10 minutes of everything I'd held inside. I talked about the students who'd messaged me on my blog, sharing their own stories of being overlooked. I talked about the systemic issues that label kids before they have a chance to define themselves. I talked about my mother, working 2 jobs and still showing up to every parent-teacher conference, only to be talked down to by educators who'd never walked a day in her shoes. I got into 9 of the 12 universities I applied to, I announced, pulling out my acceptance letters, including a full scholarship to State University, the same institutions that Mrs. Ark said were unrealistic for someone like me. I held up each letter. Columbia College, Urban University, Westfield State, each one saw what Jefferson High couldn't, potential beyond a label. Mrs. Henderson had stood up, her face pale, the approved speech crumpled in her hand. But instead of anger, I saw something else, recognition, maybe even regret. This isn't about revenge, I said, my voice softer now. It's about revelation. Every student in this graduating class has been told no in some way. Some of you were told you were too quiet, others too loud, too ambitious or not ambitious enough, too different, too much, not enough. But look at us now, we're here. We made it, not despite those labels, but in defiance of them. I pulled out my phone, something definitely not approved for speeches. This morning, my blog post about this moment already has 50,000 views. The title is, "They Said You're Not Enough," so I turned my graduation speech into a mic drop moment. People across the country are sharing their own stories of overcoming educational bias. Mrs. Henderson, you're trending on Twitter, not for being a bad teacher, but for being part of a broken system that we can fix together. The crowd erupted, not just clapping but cheering, crying, hugging. Parents who'd never met were sharing stories of their own kids' struggles. Students were recording, live streaming, posting. Principal Davies had retreated to his seat on his phone, probably doing damage control. But it was too late. The moment had already escaped the confines of Jefferson High's football field. To my fellow graduates, I said, having to raise my voice over the noise, they told us we weren't enough, but we're not just enough. We're everything. We're the future teachers who will see potential where others see problems. We're the future principals who will amplify voices instead of silencing them. We're the future parents who will teach our kids that different isn't deficient. It's powerful. I turned to walk off the stage, then stopped, turning back to the microphone one last time. Oh, and Mrs. Henderson? This essay definitely has original thought. I'd give it an A+. The roar from the crowd was deafening. As I walked back to my seat, students high-fived me, parents nodded with tears in their eyes, and even some teachers applauded. Ms. Martinez was openly crying. Mr. Pete gave me a thumbs up. Sarah Chen, perfect valedictorian Sarah Chen, grabbed my hand and whispered, "That was the speech we all needed." The rest of the ceremony was a blur. Principal Davies rushed through the diploma distribution. Mrs. Henderson left before it was over. Mr. Rodriguez avoided eye contact, but something had shifted. The air felt different, charged with possibility and recognition. After the ceremony, the footage of my speech had already been shared thousands of times. News crews showed up, wanting interviews. Parents approached me, sharing how my words had touched them. A mother grabbed my hands, tears streaming down her face. "My daughter has dyslexia. Every year teachers write her off. You just gave her hope." Mum found me in the chaos, Emma bouncing beside her in her sundress. She didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug that said everything. When she finally let go, she whispered, "Your father would be so proud. You used your voice, baby. You used it for all of us." That evening, as the sun set over Jefferson High for the last time in my high school career, I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching families take pictures by the school sign. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. The video had gone viral, really viral. News outlets were picking it up. Education advocates were sharing it. Someone had started a hashtag, more than enough. But the message that stopped me in my tracks was from Mrs. Henderson. "Marcus," she had written, "I owe you an apology. and a thank you. You're right. I became part of a system I once fought against. I forgot why I became a teacher. Your speech reminded me. Next year, I'm doing things differently. P.S. You were always college material. I was just too blind to see it. I sat there reading her message over and over. Then another came through, from Principal Davies. It was short. Your speech was not approved. See me Monday. However, I've been asked to inform you that the school board would like to meet with you about implementing your blog ideas into our curriculum. Congratulations on your scholarship. Monday. There was no Monday for me at Jefferson High. I was done, graduated free, but I wrote back, I'll be there. This conversation is just beginning. The next few weeks were surreal. The video hit 1 million views, then 5 million, then 10. I was invited onto morning shows, education podcasts, youth panels. Colleges that had rejected me suddenly wanted to know if I'd reconsider. Publishers reached out about turning my blog into a book. But the messages that meant the most were from students, hundreds, then thousands of them, sharing how they'd been labeled and limited and how they were fighting back. 3 months later, I was packing for State University when Emma knocked on my door. Marcus, you're famous at my school, she said, plopping on my bed. My teacher shows your speech to her class. She says, you're an example of resilience. I laughed, remembering being 12 like Emma, already feeling the weight of others' expectations. You know what, Em? I said, sitting beside her. They're going to try to tell you who you are too. They'll say you're too this or not enough that. But here's the secret. You get to decide who you are. Every single day, you get to choose. The day before I left for college, I went back to Jefferson High. School hadn't started yet, but teachers were there, preparing their classrooms. I knocked on Mrs. Henderson's door. She looked up, surprised, then smiled. A real smile, not the tight one I was used to. I wanted to thank you, I said, and her eyebrows shot up. No, really, you were my villain, but every hero needs one. You pushed me to prove you wrong, and in doing that, I found out who I really was. She stood up, walked around her desk, and did something she'd never done in 4 years. She hugged me. I've changed my entire curriculum, she whispered. Every student's voice matters. I'm sorry it took your courage to teach me that. As I walked through those familiar hallways one last time, I passed Mr. Rodriguez's room. He was writing equations on the board, preparing for a new year of students. He saw me, hesitated, then nodded. Not an apology, but an acknowledgement. It was enough. Ms. Martinez was in the science lab, organizing beakers. She ran out when she saw me. Marcus, I've been following everything. You did it. You really did it. Her pride was genuine, warming. I'm department head now, she added. Things are changing here. Your speech started something. Outside, Mr. Pete was trimming the hedges. He stopped when he saw me, leaning on his trimmer. Proud of you, son, he said simply. Always knew you had it in you. Those late nights in the computer lab paid off, huh? We shook hands, his calloused palm firm and reassuring. The first day of college orientation, I sat in an auditorium filled with fresh faces and nervous energy. The dean was speaking about potential and possibility. A girl next to me leaned over. Hey, aren't you the graduation speech guy? The one who went viral? I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. That was incredible, she continued. My high school guidance counselor told me I'd never make it to a 4-year university, but I'm here. Your speech played on repeat in my head during every late-night study session. That's when I realized the real mic drop moment wasn't the speech itself. It was this, the ripple effect. Every student who heard those words and decided to fight for their dreams. Every teacher who recognized their biases and chose to change. Every parent who stopped accepting limitations placed on their children. The mic drop kept echoing, reverberating in places I'd never see, changing stories I'd never hear. Now, 2 years into college, I'm studying education and journalism. My blog has become a non-profit platform where students share their stories and find support. Mrs. Henderson is on our advisory board. She's become one of our strongest advocates, using her story of transformation to help other teachers recognize and overcome their biases. Principal Davies retired early, but his replacement, Ms. Martinez, has turned Jefferson High into a model for inclusive education. Sometimes I get messages from students who are where I was, labeled, limited, told they're not enough. I always write back with the same message. They don't get to decide your worth. Your struggles are your strength. Your voice matters. And when they tell you you're not enough, remember, you're not just enough. You're everything. The speech that was supposed to be 3 minutes of approved nothing became 15 minutes of unapproved everything. But more than that, it became proof that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be silenced. Every time someone tells me that speech changed their life, I think about Mrs. Henderson's C-, Mr. Rodriguez's dismissal, Principal Davis's warnings. They thought they were putting me in my place. Instead, they were preparing me to find it. The girl I was freshman year, sitting in that cold classroom, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut, she needed to hear that speech. The boy working at the grocery store until midnight, falling asleep over textbooks, he needed to hear that speech. Every kid who's ever been told they're not enough needed to hear that speech. And that day, on that football field, under that blazing sun, they did. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything. Not the pain, not the doubt, not the nights I wanted to give up. Because every moment of being told I wasn't enough led to the moment I could stand up and say, yes, I am. And in saying it for myself, I said it for everyone who couldn't yet find their voice. That's the real mic drop, not just speaking your truth, but creating space for others to speak theirs. The last time I visited Jefferson High, there was a new motto painted in the main hallway. Every voice matters, every student is enough. Below, it was a photo from graduation day, not of me at the podium, but of the crowd, all standing together, united in a moment of recognition and change. Mr. Pete had suggested it, and the student council had unanimously approved it. Mom has that photo framed in our living room now, next to my college acceptance letters and a printed screenshot of the viral video hitting 10 million views. When people ask her about it, she doesn't talk about the viral moment or the media attention. She says, that's the day my son taught a school that different doesn't mean less than. That's the day he used his voice for everyone who'd been silenced. Emma's in high school now at Jefferson High. She says things are different. Teachers ask for student input. There's a mentorship program where kids who struggle academically are paired with those who've overcome similar challenges. The student voice speech is now chosen by committee, students and teachers together, to ensure it truly represents the graduating class. And every year, they play my speech for incoming freshmen, not as a warning, but as a promise. Your voice matters here. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd read the approved speech. If I'd played it safe, stuck to the script, graduated quietly, I probably would have still gone to State University, still studied hard, still succeeded, but I wouldn't have sparked change. I wouldn't have given voice to the voiceless. I wouldn't have proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is exactly what they tell you not to. They said I wasn't enough, so I turned my graduation speech into a mic drop moment. But the real triumph wasn't going viral or getting famous or proving my teachers wrong. It was discovering that I had been enough all along. I just needed to believe it. And sometimes that belief starts with one person standing up and saying, no, you're wrong about me. Let me show you who I really am. That speech was never about me. It was about every kid who's been underestimated, overlooked, written off. It was about changing a system that labels children before they have a chance to label themselves. It was about proving that resilience isn't just bouncing back. It's bouncing forward, using every setback as a setup for something greater. The mic has long since been dropped, but the echo continues. In classrooms where teachers now look for potential instead of problems. In students who now believe in themselves despite the doubts of others. In a school that learned to listen instead of silence. That's the real victory. Not a moment of defiance, but a movement of change. They said I wasn't enough. They were wrong. We all are more than enough. We always were. Sometimes it just takes one voice, one moment, one mic drop to remind the world of what was true all along. And if my story teaches anything, it's this. When they try to silence your voice, speak louder. When they try to limit your dreams, dream bigger. When they say you're not enough, show them you're everything.